Welcome to the Torras AI podcast. I am your host, Jordi Torras, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Carrie Jones, Principal Associate at Capital Law in the UK. Carrie brings a wealth of experience in commercial disputes with a growing focus on cyber security. She's not only a sharp legal mind, but also an advocate for resilience and innovation in today's fast moving business world. Carrie, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Carrie, you've built your career in law with a focus on commercial disputes work. What first drew you to this field, and how has your perspective evolved over time?
So initially, I loved the idea of commercial disputes because it's so varied. Every industry has disputes. You can do things from, so for example, at the moment, I'm doing a dispute for a football club, I'm doing a dispute for an abattoir. It can be, disputes for shareholders, basic things like commercial contract disputes. It could be anything that comes across your desk. And I really love that idea of no 2 days being the same. Um, how that evolved over time, I suppose, I think initially I was always very concerned that, it's such a one, if I'd be an expert in something where it's just so varied, the industry, the work is so varied. But I think as I've progressed through my career, it's understanding that people thing, they want, no one likes disputes. No one thinks, oh, do you know what? I really want to go to court today. I really want to spend all my money on this. And it's just understanding that regardless of what business or organization you're dealing with, they just want to be able to reach an end, whatever dispute they're facing, with spending the least amount of money and least amount of time. It's just learning how to do that and what methods can be used, which can actually be shared amongst different industries. So whilst the facts and situations always change and are always very varied, the underlying motives and what you're looking to achieve are generally the same. And I think as well, we have one of the oldest legal systems in the world in the UK. And I find it, and this sounds really nerdy, but I find it really cool that, I'm looking back at cases from the 1800s. I think the other day I was looking at one involved sort of dispute around someone poaching someone's clients. And the case law I was looking at that was directly relevant was involving a chicken egg seller from the 1800s. And
What?
one of his employees had stolen his chicken egg book as to who his customers are and things like that. And you're just reading this historic text, but it's still directly relevant and the law is still good today. So really nerdy, but I think that's fascinating that you can look back at history and it still be directly applicable to what's in front of you. So
That's impressive. And I've never been interested in getting into law, but now you're making it sound super, super interesting. Speaking about kind of your day now that you are principal associate at Capital Law, what does a typical day look like for you, especially when advising clients on complex matters?
So I think in disputes, there is no typical day. Your day can be completely railroaded at the last minute, as we found out on Tuesday when we were meant to be doing this podcast. And I was in court last minute. And
Right.
a lot of time people think, which is somewhat true, that you spend your day drafting and doing legal research and having meetings with clients and all the rest of it, which, a lot of the time you do. But a vast majority of it is just sitting and strategizing. It's thinking about the problem that's in front of you and working out what resources can you put at that problem to try and solve it. And that's the really interesting part of it. It's looking at not just what the law is, but what are people's motives? What can a sensible trade-off be to try and settle this? Because in disputes, while someone may be claiming for this, actually they want this. And potentially we'd be willing to give them that. And it's just bridging that gap. So a typical day, I think, is all the boring stuff like the drafting and research, but a lot of it is sort of sitting, strategizing, working out how to resolve the issues you've got in front of you.
Wow. Now, I have seen you've been involved in cyber security events in LinkedIn, right? We see that you are participating in several things, promoting awareness on how to handle cyber incidents. So the question is, how do you see the intersection of law and cyber resilience evolving in that space?
So I think it's going to evolve massively. Obviously, to date, there hasn't been much, especially in the UK, cyber specific. Have laws that are relevant, so data protection law, laws in relation to example, payment of ransomware, payment of ransom, but nothing really sort of specific. But there is legislation now coming into effect which will be specific, targeting, protecting critical national infrastructure, and their systems, and also not just them, but people who work with those systems, so suppliers, MSPs, for example. So I think legislation is going to increase, particularly given everything's online now. And the dangers of being online are increasing and becoming more recognised globally. I think, from my experience to date, most people who suffer cyber incidents don't like getting lawyers involved, which to me is baffling because, I think we're all brilliant. But I ask the question as to why that is, and a lot of the time people say, oh, they're expensive, they block things, they want to be involved in everything, etc., etc. And at the moment, what I'm trying to do is really change the narrative around that and explain why lawyers should be involved in cyber incidents and what benefit we can bring to the situation. So, for example, if you're hit with ransomware and a ransom's demanded, there is always a consideration as to, do I pay that ransom? What could the implications be? And part of that could be, considering whether or not it's actually legal to pay that ransom, because whilst in the UK, it is legal in some circumstances, depending on who's demanding the ransom. In other countries, it may not be. And so you could have, for example, a company in England and Wales wanting to pay the ransom, but they have a subsidiary or a parent company in a jurisdiction, which make it illegal.
Oh, wow.
And if they did pay the ransom, it could then affect that other company. So there are considerations. Obviously, data breach is the big one. There are specific laws governing how you need to handle data breaches, specific times put in place as to when notifications need to be made. And they're fairly quick. You've only got 72 hours really to contact the regulator if a data breach has occurred. So, being able to understand that and understand what obligations are on a company. Things like, say, for example, you work as part of a large supply chain and it's fast moving and all your systems go down and you can't get a certain product out to your customer who needs it within a very short period of time. What happens? Are you potentially liable to that customer? Could you face a claim for breach of contract? How do you manage that?
Right.
One of the things I think are really interesting, which not many people think about, is, as you know, lawyers, we have this superpower called legal. Sorry, my screen just went
There
blank.
was a sudden change of lining, so that was nice.
So as lawyers, we have this special power called legal privilege, where we can protect documents from going into the public domain if they're privileged. And so, for example, when a business potentially suffers a cyber attack, the first thing they'll do is get in professionals to understand, well, what's happened. And that report could come back and who knows what it's going to say. It could say, well, you had issues here, you had issues here, you had issues here. And you don't want that being seen by the public. You don't want that being seen by your competitors or, your customers. And if litigation does happen, then that does get released. That information will be seen by the other side because it's relevant. And what we can do is by bringing lawyers on at an early stage, we can get these reports covered by legal privilege so they don't end up, or draft versions in particular, don't end up being disclosable. And I suppose in terms of internal management as well, we see situations where when a cyber attack happens, the people working within the company will say, oh God, this has happened. What do we do? Oh, maybe it's because we didn't patch this latest piece of software. Maybe we didn't, upgrade our security. Maybe we didn't do this. Maybe this was the issue. Maybe, I didn't have 2FA
Yeah, you feel guilty,
installed,
right?
or
On
whatever
that.
the issue is. Exactly. And then as I say, we get into a dispute and we're looking at potentially the cause of the cyber attack. I've got a beautiful shopping list of all the things the people inside the company think potentially went wrong and caused this. So it just makes them look bad and is great leverage for someone trying to use that against them. So I think, lawyers are seen sometimes, they're given a bit of a bad rep in these situations, but there's so many things that they can do to try and minimize the potential damage that could arise out of cyber attacks. So I'm hoping in future businesses do see the importance of bringing us on board and understanding the value we can add, as opposed to being
Right.
sort of perceived as a hindrance.
Exactly. So a lot of companies think in terms of security of prevention, which is good. But what we have seen, right, and I don't know, Carrie, you might or might not agree, but at some point, cybersecurity incidents is not about if, it's about when are going to happen, right? Because where we are nowadays, maybe big, maybe small, but there are going to be some incidents. So being ready and having lawyers and professionals taking care of that at an early stage. I totally understand the the rationale on that. Absolutely.
And I do a lot of work with our local cyber resilience centre in Wales, and one of the things we do is we run free workshops for businesses, companies, don't even have to be that local, where we take them through, along with a really cool cybersecurity sort of provider, a ransomware them through the various steps that would occur as part of a ransomware attack. From, you're sitting at home Friday night having a nice cold glass of wine and you get your message pop up saying your systems are down. What do you do? And then it takes you through the various stages from that happening through to, you've now been told that, I don't know, $1 million of crypto is being demanded, in exchange for your files being unencrypted. And we give businesses guidance as to what they should be thinking about. Obviously, no business is the same, but there are key messages that apply to everyone. So what, the key things they should be thinking about, who they should be talking to, whether they've got any notification requirements on them. And it's a really cool sort of session that we run just to help people feel more confident. Because like you said, it is a when and not. And we just hope that when people do face that, they have more confidence, and B, they know who to call. They know, the support out there that's available, obviously including lawyers, but from things like the police, you can have ransomware negotiators. Obviously, they're supported by available at the ICO. There's so much out there, and it's just helping people understand the support that's available given the potential devastating consequences.
Yeah, the ICO. I remember these three letters now. Is what was ICO standing for? Commissioner.
So it's the Information Commissioner's Office.
These are the
So in
guys.
England and Wales, yeah, these are the ones. So they regulate sort of data and how data is handled in the UK. And they're the ones that can punish if it's seen that you haven't been handling data correctly.
Absolutely. And look at that. Today is Thursday, right? Well, last
Mm-hmm.
Monday, now I think you are in somewhere in Wales in some beautiful forest, I'm
Yeah,
imagining, in the middle of
I
the
am.
fields in Wales. That's awesome. Well, in Barcelona, right, which is in Spain, and just Monday there was this huge electric blackout. Like,
I heard.
bang, everything was gone. It was like for a few hours, it was
So was
like
that everything?
everything. No internet,
Wow.
no trains, no elevators, and the only communications that you had was like cell phones. But cell phones also starting to calm down very quickly. So you really couldn't send a message or call. Anything. It was like back in the 80s. Actually worse than that because trains wouldn't work. So we would, like listen to the radio or
Brilliant.
stuff like that. If you have batteries, that was the only thing that really worked. Was it was terrible. And one of the but because believe it or not, they don't know, still don't know what happened, and it's been a few days. And nobody is officially telling what the heck happened. But one of the possibilities is a cyber attack. So and
Really?
yeah, and nobody has yet ruled out that possibility. So we'll see. It's going to be fascinating, but literally it could happen anytime. Again, nobody knows. It's like renewable energy, cyber attacks. It was the weather. I can all kind of theories. Oh my goodness, that was really
Wow.
really bad. Okay, but considering all this, there was no people hurt at the end of the day, or just minor inconveniences. But as far as I know, I think there was no major um, loss of lives or anything like that. Which it could have been, I believe. Yeah, yeah,
You couldn't have cooked, no cold food, nothing like that.
yeah. People got inside trains, inside tunnels, absolutely in the dark. Can you imagine that?
Oh no.
Yeah, how do you get out of the train and then how do you get out of the tunnel? And you can't see anything because, well, it's a tunnel and all the lights are also
Wow.
off. Yeah, for some
And what
people it was
about
bad.
hospitals?
Well, big hospitals, and now you know why, they have their own generators. So
Yeah.
hospitals, I know that financial institutions, I know I have friends that work in IT departments in banks. They had their own generators to keep the computers on. So these things kind of work. Even the airports were working. They had their own generators. But still, it was. But trains do not have generators now. I know. Oh man. Listen, from your experience, what are the biggest legal blind spots that companies have when expanding their online presence and adopting new technologies like artificial intelligence?
So I think in terms of expanding online presence, usually businesses look to engage third-party suppliers to help them with that expansion. And I think it's the case of just making sure that those third-party suppliers, as you're evolving and growing, and potentially taking on new data or using that new data for a different purpose, you're monitoring their capabilities and understanding exactly what protection they're putting in place if they are touching your data or handling your data, and it's able to keep up with the evolving nature of your business. I think that's really important, and especially, if, for example, they something happens where they cause data to be lost or they do something in a way which creates liability on behalf of your business or company, having a mechanism where you can recover that loss from them, um, you know, making sure there's an avenue to pursue them if, for example, they haven't been handling your data adequately, or you've told them that you're looking to process data in a different way. They assure you that what they're doing is very secure, they're meeting all the necessary obligations, and then turns out they haven't been. So I think that's, just keeping an eye on and constantly monitoring who has access to your data on your website, just to make sure that they're keeping up with your progress and not hindering it. I think as well, in relation to the use of Gen AI, um, especially in regulated industries, obviously people or companies who are regulated have very tough regulations on them. And I think at the moment, especially where they're looking to adopt Gen AI, regulators aren't necessarily keeping up with that movement, and they've been slow to issue guide the use of Gen AI. So it's a legal blind spot there, because it's not clear what they can do, what they can't do, how they should be using these tools in a way which enables them to stay in line with their regulation. I think in terms of, it generally sort of plays into the point about, we talked about suppliers, data protection policies, privacy policies that companies have, if they are adopting tools like Gen AI, making sure that those policies are kept up to date to reflect what that business is now using, how they're processing that data, potentially with use of the Gen AI, to make sure that they are properly covered. And I think as well, as part of use of tools, just making sure businesses understand what those tools are, what they do, and how they could be responsible for them. So there was a cool case actually, which I was looking at earlier, which I thought was quite applicable to you, Geordie, was the use of the chatbot.
Oh, look at
And
that.
it was a case, yeah, and it was where an individual was talking to a Canadian Airlines chatbot and
Mhm.
wanted to understand. He needed to fly back as a result of a bereavement and wanted to understand if there was sort of a bereavement fare for the flight. So he asked the chatbot for this airline. The chatbot said, yeah, just book through the usual platforms and then seek the refund for the discount in 90 days. What the chatbot didn't say is that actually what the policy was is that at the time of booking the flight, they had to explain that it was a bereavement flight and seek confirmation that they would get the discount. So obviously what the gentleman did is he booked through the chatbot, followed its advice, the refund in 90 days. And the airline said, well, look, no, that's not what our policy is. And he said, well, that's what your chatbot said to me. So I followed this advice and that's what I did. And it actually went to court, and the court turned around and said, well, sorry, the chatbot it's the representation of your company. It
Right.
speaks for you. And so, you have to be bound by what it says. So I think, it's really important to understand
Yeah.
what the potential, what these tools are saying, what are they doing, what are they potentially signing you up to.
Fascinating. So
And
the
it's an
court said,
issue
no,
potentially
no,
for
your
industries.
chatbot actually represents you as a company, and therefore, whatever message it spit out is you. So, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, because chatbots aren't legal persons, are they? They're software.
Right. Yes.
Can't sue a chatbot.
No.
So yeah, the court said that the company is responsible for it. So I thought that was a really interesting one. Um, I suppose one of the other ones, which is really prolific at the moment, is if Gen AI, for example, create something, so an invention or a design or whatever that might be, can who owns it? Can they
Right.
patent it? Who has the right to do that? And a lot of places, a lot of countries around the world haven't come up with a position on that because, is it the software provider for the tool? Is it the person using the tool? Is it who is it? And I think at the moment the US has said, well, you can't patent it because it hasn't been produced by a legal person.
Right.
And there's a real blind there. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops and how the law is going to treat, things made through AI.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And listen, just yesterday I was using one of these generative AIs, these reasoning models, right, that are recently very popular. And that reasoning model had an internal problem using Bing as a search engine. And I know because he told me. So the AI said, well, I would be using search, but it looks like the search engine doesn't work. So it's Bing, by the way. So let me try with Google. Maybe Google is going to work better. Like, you're telling me all your internal infrastructure. And if you have a customer that, I mean, that's just a public website, but you could have an actual chatbot say, I'm going to try this other password that I have in this file. I don't know, right? So it's super important to build when it comes to generic AI. We still have to get used to it and make sure that we are able to harness the power, but also control the shortcomings that it might have. That's amazing.
Exactly.
All right. So you're very kind and very nice. You've done pro bono work supporting amateur rugby clubs. How important do you think legal literacy is for smaller organizations and communities?
I think it's hugely important. I think, especially in the sporting industry, there are such huge ramifications for sporting clubs who don't follow the regulations to the T. And a lot of these clubs are run by people who, that's not their main job. It's a not-for-profit organisation. They're just looking to help out on the weekend with their local football club, for example. And they don't necessarily have the training that's needed to be able to deal with sort of the legal portals or the transfer portals, which could result in fines being implemented, points deduction. The local football club near where we are, which we helped out. So it is very important. And I think as well, it's important in relation to growth because, small companies are small now, but they'll be looking to build, they'll be looking to grow. And as part of that, they'll be entering into contracts. Now, a contract that suits a company whilst it's in its very early stages won't necessarily be suited to that company once it's grown, over time. And I think being able to understand that and appreciate that and making provision for that in the contract so that there's a proper clause in there to allow you to terminate if you need to be able to increase your prices if you need to be able to potentially use other suppliers if you need to, if the supply you can't handle your growth levels. So I think it's important to not only make sure that what you're doing at that stage is you're properly covered and you're not incurring problems, but also later on in the line that you're future proofing yourself to make sure that you don't bind yourself to something which prevents you from growing in the way that you want to.
That makes a lot of sense. And let's say for young professionals, right? So what advice would you give to anyone looking to carve out a leadership role in the commercial disputes world?
Resilience. I think being resilient is absolutely key. It's a tough job. It's not easy. Like I said earlier, your day could change dramatically in the space of a couple of minutes. And it's being able to be resilient and adapt to that and understand that, the job has many, many highs in the sense of, the output and the satisfaction and the how interesting it is. But also it's a tough job in the sense that the hours can be long and obviously clients, not including you, obviously, Geordie, but clients can be demanding. And it's just understanding that and appreciating it. And I think attention to detail as well is a massive one because nowadays there's so much data and information available. It's just being able to make sure that you're really precise with what you're looking at and making sure that you're not rushing to a conclusion. You're really considering what information you've got available and really thinking and strategizing. So I think those things are really important because a lot of the time we see juniors come through and they're looking to rush and they just want to go from A to B immediately because that's how the younger generation are nowadays. They sort of everything's so available all the time and they can get hold of everything, and we see that coming through in people's work where they just want to just get to the answer so quickly. So just taking the time just to step back and really look at things and consider and understanding that you don't need to have an answer like this. It's a lot of the time you do have time to really look at what's in front of you to think of something meaningful. So I think that's the advice I'd give to juniors sort of looking to come through and develop a leadership role.
Absolutely. All right. For all the audience here listening, you want to follow the steps of Carrie Jones? You have the advice right here. Listen, Carrie, I want to be super respectful with your time. But just one last question is, if anyone from the audience would like to contact you or Capital Law, what would be the best way?
So LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Probably best way to find me is just search me on there. My email address is super easy. It's carrie.jones@capitallaw.co.uk. So people can reach out, send me an email. Always happy to help.
All right, I'll do that, and I put that on our website, so you'll find a link. Thank you so much, Carrie.
Great. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for having me, Jordan. It's been great. It's been lovely to catch up as well.
Absolutely. And for the audience, stay tuned because very soon we're going to have a very interesting guest as well. Have a wonderful day.